Well, I'll start out. My name is Dave Gustafson. I'm one of the open space rangers with the City of Boulder. And some people might be wondering, what's the City of Boulder doing up here? Well, the reason that I'm here is not actually because of what I do for a living. It's because I live in the neighborhood where this lion recently killed a dog. And so Sam and I have been working together for quite a while. Sam works for the Colorado Department of Wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which is ultimately responsible for all the wildlife management in the state of Colorado. I work for the City of Boulder, and my picture up here is, of course, of the city. One of the things about Boulder is it's surrounded by about 50,000 acres of open space, and we have a lot of critters down there. It's part of Sam's management zone, but his district basically goes all the way from I-25, Coal Creek Canyon, up here to Nederland, to the top of the Indian Peaks. So Sam's a very busy person. He could spend every waking minute of his life in Boulder dealing with the wildlife down there. So one of the things we do in Boulder is we help them out as agents, but everything that is managed in the city is managed according to CPW. So that's a little bit about my background. In the city of Boulder, we do have quite a few lions that inhabit the city and go in and out of the open space. So it's something I've been doing for about 20 years, responding to a lot of calls about lions in the city. On Monday morning, my wife, who's on Facebook, I don't have any social media awareness at all. So just so you know, I've never been on social media. I don't have any accounts. My wife told me that a friend on our road, whose name is Jim Reese, some of you probably saw that he was posted on Monday morning that he could not find his dog and he had some blood in his driveway. So I decided, I think I know what this probably is. I'm going to go down and help Jim. And sure enough, when I went down, found what was very evident, that a lion had been in his yard and got his dog. So that's what I want to talk a bit about today, is a little bit about what we know. Right now, all we know is that there's one dog that's missing out of Big Springs. So what else is on Facebook, whatever else you're sharing, that's the only thing that Sam and I are aware of as far as pets missing in the Big Springs area. So I'll talk a little bit about that incident and what happened and how we figured out it was a lion, and some of the things we can do to be safe as far as being here in Nederland, and how we can help protect wildlife. And Sam will do a little bit about that too. I'm just basically going to talk a little bit about biology and some of the clues of a lion being around in your neighborhood. So if we want to go to the next slide here. Yep. Okay, so face this way. Okay, you bet. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the biology of Felis concolor, which is actually the scientific name of mountain lions. They're found in a lot of the United States, even some of the Midwestern states right now have them. Typically are going to be around about 100 pounds or so. The really big ones that you might see once in a great while that get around 200, that's very, very rare. So mainly, like if you see like a 170-pound lion, typically it's a male. That's a pretty big lion. The easiest way to tell them apart, and this is one of the most confusing things when I first saw my first lion, is I didn't realize what it was until I saw that tail. And that tail is the biggest characteristic of the lion. It's almost as long as its body. So it's pretty long, and it's really the telltale sign, no pun intended, that you've got a mountain lion in your neighborhood. We get plenty of calls in Boulder, and people, God rest their souls, that sometimes they get confused. But we get all sorts of calls in Boulder about, I've got a mountain lion in my car or my yard, and we see things like maybe a Doberman picture or so yeah, so there's some confusing sometimes when people see them. Of course, bobcats have a lot shorter tail. So there's been some interesting calls when we get calls about lions out there. But if you go to the next slide, one more button. This is what their prints are going to look like. And a lot of people get confused about mountain lion prints too, but so just to clear a couple things up. Since they're cats, a lot of times they won't have their claws displayed when they're walking around. Sometimes they can, but the telltale sign of a mountain lion cat is it's pretty rounded. And then the bottom of these heel pads right here have 3 oblong little buttons on them here. So if you can see up in the corner up there, the mountain lion has those 3 telltale signs on the heel pad, whereas a dog only has a couple bumps. So that's really what you're kind of dealing with. Next slide. You know, you'll think a lot of them would be really big and huge, but here's your typical mountain lion track. This was just a couple of years ago up on West Magnolia. You can see the rounded part of the track, and then also you see on the outside of it all of the fur that's causing that impression on the outside as the lion walks across the snow. And that's a fairly decent size lion, but it's not even really bigger than a pen. So it's not something that's going to be as massive as your hand, depending on how big the lion is. But that's pretty typical of what you'll see. Next one. Here's one down in Boulder, just on the side of the road. I'm driving down the road one day and take a look at it. I'm like, that's a lion track. And without even having to take a look at the tracks, how do I know that? The tail, yeah, it looks like somebody rode a bike down there, and they're dragging their tail through the snow, and you'll see that off and on with lion tracks as well. So next one. So the other thing about the other day with Jim, one of the telltale signs when I got down there and took a look at what was going on was this is actually a lion up in South Dakota that he's got a German Shepherd, and he's taking it out of a yard and walking away with it. Now you can think about how that's going to look in the snow, right? It doesn't matter if it's a deer, it doesn't matter if it's a dog. Lions just can't pick something up and carry away with it without a lot of evidence coming off of it, like blood, hair, and then it's going to actually look like a snowplow as he drags that through the snow. They don't want to have it anywhere close to people. They don't want to be disturbed because they're going to go and cache it. And so you're going to see that telltale sign of maybe 100, 200 yards where they drag it through the woods, and then they're going to end up trying to bury it in what's called a cache. Next slide. Their number one prey is going to be deer. That's what they're pretty much trying to drag. So they're not going to be able to drag a big deer a long ways away. Sometimes they might cache it nearby, but it doesn't matter if that's their number one prey. They're gonna eat anything that they can that's made out of meat. So like down in Boulder, next slide, there's a lot of signs like this on the western side of Boulder, and these are cats and dogs that are probably not coming back because they've been cached somewhere. Even if it's a smaller animal, a lot of times you're going to stick it somewhere and come back later to feed on it. They're not going to eat it all right there. So it's all about, where can I put this? Where can I save this, or something else can't get it? What a cache looks like is the next one. Well, this is a lion that was actually up in a tree. Let me just cover this before I show you the next cache. The way that typically lions are going to hunt are they're not like big cheetahs. That's actually what they evolved from. But they're not like cheetahs where they're going to run down their prey for miles and then tackle it. They want to get on top of it really quick with short bursts of speed and try to get on top of its neck and either suffocate it or break its neck. So they want to get on top of it as quickly as they can. They can climb trees, they can hunt out of trees, but usually they're going to be hiding somewhere and waiting for something to come by and then use that explosive powerness to get on top of it instantly. Next slide. This is what a cache looks like. This is a cache down off of the Fowler Trail on open space one year, just driving down the road, look over, boom. This lion killed it right then and there. Didn't have any reason to drag it anywhere, but started to bury it with the pine needles and the pine duff and some limbs. And that's typically what a cache will look like. This is something to be really aware of up in Nederland here, because if you see this, next slide, it usually means that the line's not that far away. Sometimes it might be really methodically buried, but a lot of times you'll find it and it'll kind of look like a haphazard area like this. But typically the line's not that far away from it. Next slide. And so that's where you really need to be careful of what you're getting into, especially if it's your dog. They're very protective of this. I've never heard of somebody getting attacked going by a cache, but I've been to a lot of calls where dogs have been chased away or dogs have been taken because they poked their nose in the wrong place by a lion. So if you're seeing things like pieces of bone in your yard or fur, or your dog's bringing back hoofs, those are not good signs that something is going on in your neighborhood. All right, next one. Oh, one more. Oh, here we go. Like I said, sometimes they'll lay right on top of them and be very protective of them. And a large deer like this, it might take, what do you think, Sam, 3-4 days maybe for them to eat it. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to try to eat the insides that are really nutrient rich, like the liver, stomach, those types of things. And then they'll keep coming back to feed on the meat portions of it. But it might take them 3 to 4 days to finish off a whole deer. And at that time, they're not going to leave it alone. They're going to be sticking around to make sure that nobody messes with it. Next one. This is one up on Green Mountain Road one day, the trails down here. And some people were walking and then their dog was being chased by a lion. So they called it in. 15 minutes later, we get another call, dog being chased by a lion. And it kept going on for about 15 minutes until we finally got up there and couldn't find the lion. But I put the camera on the cache and walked away. 5 minutes later, this picture gets taken. She was watching me the whole time and she actually had a cub with her. So if you don't think that they're there, the best thing to do is think that they are, because they are probably watching you. It's one of the biggest things when we went and got Jim's dog the other day. I was like, Jim, we can't just run up there and start digging around. We really have to be methodical and start looking, because I guarantee you he's watching us. All right, next one. It's amazing where you find caches. The way that we deal with caches with CPW and on open space is that typically if they're in an area where they're not going to be a problem, we're going to leave them, because they spent a lot of time and effort to get those caches, right? And that's what they eat. So if we take it, we're basically taking their food from them and they have to go somewhere else to find it. But sometimes caches are in areas where you just cannot leave them and you don't want to leave them. Next one. I was walking down the road one day up by Chautauqua, really busy residential area. A little old lady comes out of this house and she's like, hey buddy, do you guys pick up dead deer? And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong? She's like, well, I think a deer got hit by a car and it died in my yard. And I was like, well, where is it? And she's like, see that tree right there next to my house, right next to that little box? So I go over there and I pull back the branches. Next slide. There's a cache line within 5 feet of her front door. So there are certain times we can leave them, and there are a lot of times you don't want to leave them for your own safety. Okay, so that's something to think about when you're finding them. If you're like, well, I'm not going to call anybody and tell anybody about this, it could be a problem where that line ends up running into someone else or getting into more trouble because that cache is in an area where it probably should have got pulled. All right. One more other thing too about caches. I call in North Boulder one day, little bobcat sitting on my deck. Not a little bobcat, right? He and his brother and his sister, they were all underneath that deck. And the reason they were underneath that deck is because mom had found a deer, killed it, and stuck it underneath there. Decks are notorious for bad things to happen. Sam will tell you a story probably later about a bear that tried to hibernate underneath somebody's deck up here. But I've dug out lots of pets, rabbits, and deer underneath people's decks. Any place that you have in your backyard, and in Nederland, we have a lot of places where we have boards and sheds and all sorts of stuff that lions can get underneath. They will get in there and put a cache. So you really need to be aware if you're seeing tracks going into your junk pile that there might be something stuck in there. So, okay. Why do we have more calls probably in the winter about cats than we do in the summer? It's because they're always here. There's not really a big change in migration or anything like that because they don't really migrate. It's because of the foliage. There's more vegetation in the summertime, so you don't see them. Next slide. But in the wintertime, once we lose that vegetation, you start to see their caches and you start to see them. So there's not an uptick in lion activity in the area. There's always been lions around here. They have always been right here in Boulder, probably walking by wild bear on the sidewalk at night for a long time. So nothing's really changed, okay? We don't have an uptick on meat eaters in Nederland. They've been here, all right? One thing I will talk about really quickly though, is a few years ago, we did a study in Boulder on CPW, or excuse me, CWD. I get them mixed up all the time. Chronic wasting disease. We put about 100 collars on different deer that were out there, and we were trying to track how long they lasted from getting the disease. Once they would die, we would get a signal from the deer's collar that they weren't moving anymore, and we would go out and we would see what they died from. A lot of them, whether they died from the disease or whether they died from another reason, they were being predated on by lions. In other words, we were digging up a lot of caches and finding a lot of these deer. And that led into what was called the Front Range Lion Study in 2005. Next slide. Division went out and collared quite a few lions in the Front Range and started getting some information about where they go and what they're all about. So I was seeing some things on Facebook the other day that were just not even in the ballpark. And I want to talk a little bit about what lions do here in the Front Range. So I think on that computer there should be one map if you exit out of there. Yep. Yep. So this is a map of the Front Range, and about right here is Boulder. Right up there is Lyons, and down here is Coal Creek. So here we are up in Nederland. If you take a look at all these AMs and AFs, those mean adult male or adult female. So if we take a look like at this white one right here, she's a female. You can see these are just GPS points for a year's worth of data of where she's been roaming. And she's been staying right down in Boulder the whole time. Here's a little bit of a smaller male. That's a pretty small range, because if you see these big red ones here that go way back up towards us by Nederland, those are typically the male ranges. They go a lot further away. The females are usually right tight close up against humanity. Does anybody know why that is? So what do females have that males don't have? They have babies, which means you have another mouth to feed. So why would you want to be next to the big city? There's more things to eat, right? So when the sun goes down and I got to teach Junior how to hunt, I go into the city where there's lots of deer on open space. There's deer in parks, there's cats, there's dogs, there's chickens. That's why they're down there. It's a lot easier for them to prey and to show those young ones how to eat when they're in the Front Range, whereas these big males are the ones that are probably taking these big, longer loops through the Front Range, finding things like deer. So just the one picture that we saw in the tracks that we saw from the other day from the lion over at Barker, that looks like a pretty large male. So just so people don't think there's, a bunch of cubs running around here, from what we're seeing, and Sam, would you agree? Probably looks like a fairly big male that's over there. So pretty normal. We don't have a big meat eater running around Nederland killing dogs left and right. This happens quite often.
So when you lean into that slide, it turns white on the.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, so if you.
Oh, okay.
Can you just see if it changes?
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah,
Yep,
there you go. So now we can see.
Okay.
It must be like a little stick or something.
Any questions on any of that before I come over to Sam? Just a little bit about the Front Range. Hopefully, people understand a little bit about what to look like in their to look for in their yards. Get a better understanding. It's a perfect time of year right now to see what's going on, because we have snow. So if you've never seen a mountain lion up here in the mountains, I sure hope you get to see one, because it's one of the coolest things that there is. So I'm good. All right.
So do you want to take a question?
I didn't have to see the question.
You want a question?
Sure.
Yes, someone has a question. No.
So Jason Walp has a question, and it's how can we tell the difference between a hood from a lion and one left from a hunter?
Wood.
Does he mean cash? Do you mean cash, Jason?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll look. Yeah. What I would do is, the other thing too about a cache. Let me jump up in front here. The other thing about a cache is if you take a look at a cache with the fur, it will actually look like someone took a scissors and cut the fur. And that's because the mountain lion's back canine are so sharp that they actually look like a scissors that are going through there. But if you're finding things, it's not uncommon this time of year to find animals that have been taken during the hunting season. But a lot of times what you'll see is you might see like chew marks on the bones. If it's a hoof or a pelvis or something like that. You'll also a lot of times you will not find the back legs of an elk or the front legs of an elk or a deer if it's a hunter, because they would have taken that with them unless they threw those scraps out later after they butchered their deer. So that's a good question. Yeah. But typically they're all going to be in one big pile, usually pretty close to the cache until the predators get in there, and then you start to have kind of a garbage field that gets spread all over the place. And that's one of the things too, just to let you know, when they're cached, they're protective of it. But one of the easiest ways that I always find caches is if I'm looking for them, is I look for Stellar Jays and Blue Jays, or Stellar Jays and Magpies, because they're in there feeding on what's left of it. So if you're seeing a big pile of something with a bunch of jays and magpies on it, that probably is what it is. It's something that's buried and it belongs to someone. So, yeah, good question. Turn it over to you, Sam.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I'll pull my mask down just for a second so everyone online can see what I look like. If you see me around town, stop me, say hey. I'll real quick just add to what Dave was saying with that last question about hooves and how to determine what is a hunter kill and what is a lion kill. For those of you online, the teeth that he was talking about were these hind carnassial pair right here where my thumb is at. So that's the pair of teeth on the top jaw and the bottom jaw that are acting as scissors. So that's something that's pretty unique to predators in general, but lions have a pretty pronounced set that, like Dave said, just cut right through flesh, cut right through skin. And then I'll also add as well, if you find a hoof that looks like it's been cut off with a saw or something like that, like right above a joint or below a joint, probably going to be a hunter's leftovers, I guess. A lot of hunters will cut bones with saws. Not all of them do. There's sometimes where they'll leave full bones, but if you see something that's got a real fine cut, it's probably from a hunter as well. Cool. So we'll go ahead and start into my presentation. My goal here with this presentation is just to add on to what Dave was talking about with both the biology and the behavior of lions and how we can coexist with lions in Nederland and in the greater Colorado community. I see some questions popping up here, but yep. Yeah, so I'll cover a lot of stuff about like precautions of how to recreate responsibly in mountain lion country, how to live responsibly, just some stuff that you can do at your own home to help mitigate concerns with lions and limit those conflicts. So go ahead, next slide. So like Dave said, I work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm one of 2 wildlife officers that's assigned to the general Nederland area. I cover south of Nederland. My coworker Tyler covers north of Nederland. We look the exact same, so good luck telling us apart if you see us. Our mission as an agency is to perpetuate the wildlife resources of the state. So we do that in a couple of different ways. Next slide. Primarily, we do that through management, conservation, and education. Our management can include, I've got some animations in here, sorry. Yeah, hunting and fishing, as well as wildlife viewing and conservation. So hunting and fishing is really important for us to help manage wildlife populations and get a population of different species where we can have a sustainable population that'll perpetuate into the future. That's our ultimate goal for these species. Viewing provides a fantastic opportunity for people who maybe don't hunt or fish to experience those wildlife resources and enjoy them. Also gives an opportunity for people to learn about wildlife and how to coexist with them. But ultimately, our goal is conservation of wildlife. So we want to maintain these wildlife populations into perpetuity for future generations of Coloradans to enjoy. So the next couple slides we can kind of skip through because Dave covered a lot of this. We'll stop. Next one here. So one thing I did want to touch on was mountain lion behavior. So if you see a mountain lion out in the woods, one thing you want to look for is what their posture is like. So the photo on the right should be correct for you guys, I think. The farthest away from me photo for you folks online is a threatened or defensive posture. So that animal's got its ears pinned back. You'll see the same thing in moose. You'll see the same thing in elk. Those ears will be pinned back to the neck. That animal is threatened, is defensive. If you look in the middle, that lion's got one of her kits. You know, she's just being a mom. So she's pretty calm and relaxed in that sort of situation. Hunting, the lion is usually going to have its head down. Its ears are going to be up and alert forward. So that animal is looking for prey. Usually if you see an animal like that, it's not going to be looking for you. It's probably looking for deer or something. We'll go to the next slide here. Again, with the aggressive though, those ears are pinned back. If you see that, you really want to start paying attention to what that lion is doing. We can skip on to the next ones here. All right, so why are we seeing this lion in Nederland? Why do we have wildlife in our backyard? Ultimately, it comes down to what habitat is. So there's 4 main components to habitat. Anybody in the in-person room want to take a guess at what a couple of them are? Food, yep, food's a big one. Water, yeah, there's 2 more that are kind of more obscure. Shelter, yeah, the last one is space, which is kind of weird. So food, water, shelter, and space, all of that comes together, one more time, creates habitat. And ultimately for wildlife and mountain lions included, home is where the habitat is. So if you have good lion habitat, you're going to have lions there. A couple examples of what sorts of food resources might be provided in like a urban or semi-urban small town environment like we have here in Ned would be, go ahead, I've got like 5 pictures that'll pop up. Bird feeders, fruit trees, koi ponds. I'm not sure why I have that picture in there. I don't think there's too many koi ponds up here. We do stock the pond in Chapter Park, so maybe there's some fish in there. And raccoons, mesopredators, all these other species that could be a prey base for mountain lions can be congregated in by a variety of things. Feeding your pets outside or leaving pet food outside can attract mesopredators like foxes, like coyotes, like raccoons. All of those animals, even though they're predators, can be a prey species or prey animal for mountain lions. So if you're attracting those other animals, you're just in turn attracting mountain lions as well. Same thing with deer. If you have a lot of deer in your yard, or you're attracting a deer to your yard, which is ultimately illegal, you're still going to be bringing lions in. You're not just going to be bringing in that deer that you want to see. It's going to have other stuff that's coming in down the road. Same thing with bird feeders. Keep going on that one. Bird baths, water in your yard. I'm sure you've all seen moose all over the place. I don't know if we've had any videos of moose playing in sprinklers in Nederland. I don't think I've seen that yet, but probably only a matter of time. Same thing with bears. Bears, especially in the summertime, if they're trying to cool off a little bit, they don't have a problem with hopping in someone's pond. So shelter, again, Dave kind of talked about this a little bit. Both from a perspective of just where that lion wants to hide during the day while it's resting, and as somewhere where it can effectively hide its cache underneath porches, underneath other decks. We did have an incident over here the past, I think it was 3 months ago or so, where we had a bear that was trying to hibernate underneath a foundation. And actually the foundation was pretty secure. That bear burrowed down and was trying to find a spot to get underneath that house. Luckily, we were able to get the bear out. I haven't heard from it since. Well, it took us a couple of tries. Took us a couple of tries to get the bear out, but we got the bear out. Haven't had any incidents since then, which is fantastic. That's what we're going for. But securing those sorts of things, if you've got a shed outside, if you've got an exposed deck, an open deck, will really go a long way in helping to limit the amount of habitat in your yard and right around your house that a lion could use. Keep going to space. So like Dave said, all of Boulder County basically is lion habitat, short of maybe the far eastern reaches out by I-25. But even on a map that I'll show you later, we do have lions out there. We had a lion that was collared in Nebraska 2 years ago that came out to Fort Collins, came through Boulder, went through Broomfield. So they move, they can be just about anywhere. So anywhere that you see that you're going to be in Boulder County is lion country. Anywhere is moose country. Well, not anywhere is moose country. A lot of places are moose country. Pretty much anywhere is bear country. So just being aware that these animals are here, they're on the landscape for us to coexist with. All right, go ahead. So how can we minimize conflict with lions? That's kind of my main goal of discussing here tonight. We want to limit the amount of conflicts that we have with lions in the future. There's a couple different things that we need to address. First, we need to address limiting our attraction of wildlife, like prey species, into our home areas. So like I said earlier, if you've got a lot of like pet food, other attractants for prey species right around your home, you probably want to clean that up and limit that, store it properly. So there's not raccoons, there's not rabbits, there's not a bunch of foxes, there's not deer that are wandering around your yard consistently. That's going to bring in a lion eventually. I mean, just because you haven't seen one come in there doesn't mean that they're not coming through there relatively consistently. Go ahead. Pets. We want to secure our pets as much as we can. I grew up, you guys know where Sedalia is at. I grew up in Sedalia, which is prime lion country, just like Nederland is. We had a dog when I was living out there that we kept outside all the time. I know a lot of people in Nederland are the same way. We started bringing our dogs in because we eventually had one that was killed by a bear, and it's sad and it's unfortunate and it was terrible. It broke my sister's heart when that dog died, but we started bringing them in, especially at night. So I think it's really important for people in Nederland to maybe start considering that. If you've got a way to properly secure your animals, if they want to be outside, or a fenced in enclosure with a roof is going to be your best way to maintain or to avoid conflicts with predators. Your home, we talked a little bit about just securing like underneath. That's going to be your best bet. So if you've got a porch, make sure you're putting some lattice in there, bury that lattice down, a foot, 2 feet in the ground or something like that, because foxes will dig under, coyotes will dig under, mountain lions could do the same. Sorry, I need to catch my breath here with the mask on. Your yard, kind of the same thing as your home, keeping things secure and tidy. I will also say, I say this to a lot of people in Boulder, especially around like the Chautauqua area. They ask, why are there so many lions right here or so many bobcats right here? There's a ton of cover in that area. There's a lot of older trees, which are beautiful. They're gorgeous. There's shrubs all over the place. Beautiful place to live. But those shrubs do provide fantastic security cover for bobcats, mountain lions, coyotes, raccoons, foxes, all those species. Love that stuff. I think it's important to maintain some of that on your property, especially if you've got, a nice property that you like the aesthetic of, but limiting the amount that's really close to your house will keep animals further away from your house proper, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to everyone in the audience here? Okay. Recreation. I'm actually going to touch on that one just a little bit later, so we'll skip over that for now. Well, actually, I changed the slide around. So when you see a mountain lion, say you're up at Hazing, going for a hike, going towards Jasper or something like that. You see a lion on the trail. First thing that you want to do is just, gather your wits. Don't panic. Don't just start running. If you start running, that could trigger a predatory instinct in that lion. So you want to stay calm, but you want to make yourself large. Let that lion know that you're in charge. You want to face it, back away slowly. If you've got children with you, keep them close. Don't let them, run out in front of you, run out behind you. A lot of times, especially with younger lions, there will be more than one in the area. So you see that one lion right there, doesn't mean that's the only predator in the area. There could be another one 50 yards off the trail, could be behind you. Keeping your head on a swivel is definitely going to help in that situation. Let that lion know that you're the one that's in charge. Yell at it, back away slowly. Like I said, don't turn and run, because that's probably about the worst thing that you could do in this sort of situation. 99.9% of the time, that lion's going to turn around and just walk away. It's going to bound off and you won't see it. If it does attack you, which has happened in Colorado as recently as last year, you need to fight back. Punch that lion in the face, kick, do everything you need to do to get that lion to go away. What the mechanism that a lion uses to kill its prey is suffocation. So they're not going to be like a pack of wolves where they're nipping and biting and trying to drag you down. That lion's going to clamp onto something and it's going to hold on until it suffocates whatever it's clamped onto. Usually they're going onto a deer or an elk. They're going onto the back of the neck. They're hitting the trachea, closing off the airway, suffocating that animal, and that's how they're killing it. So last year, 2 years ago, I think, you guys probably heard about the attack in Fort Collins, the trail runner out by Horsetooth. That was a younger lion. It was also fairly emaciated, so it was pretty desperate, we think. What happened in that attack, to my knowledge, is that lion latched onto the runner's arm and did not let go. and he was able to fight. Ultimately, he killed the lion because it was not letting go of his arm. So just another example of that lion's probably not gonna let go of your neck if it's on your neck, but your best bet is to just fight. So if you do get attacked, fight back. Go ahead. All right, so a couple of just myths here. Let's get a true or false from the audience. You guys all live in the mountains, so this.
I don't know if they can read it.
Okay. Oh yeah, it is mirrored, isn't it? So true or false, mountain lions belong in the mountains, not in my neighborhood. This is a little catch-22 in Nederland because it's both the mountains and the neighborhood. So true, mountain lions belong in the mountains, but they also can be in any neighborhood. So like Dave said, they exist here. They've always been here. We haven't really seen an uptick in the amount of lions. They've just always been around. You can go to the next one here. I did adapt this presentation to one that was given in Lafayette, so a little bit different crowd, different demographic, I guess, of experience with living in the wild. All right, go ahead. All right, so this one, true or false, people are in danger from mountain lions. Any guesses? False, usually, but we'll go ahead and say both. So while mountain lions, like I said, 99.9% of the time, if you have a mountain lion encounter, you're going to be fine as long as you follow those tips. You know, make sure you're in charge, yell at the animal, back away slowly, keep children close. You're going to be okay. They do pose a human safety risk in some select circumstances. That one in Fort Collins I was just talking about, again, young lion, emaciated, desperate situation. The other one in Loveland 2 years ago now was rabid. It was a rabid lion, so that sort of stuff does happen. It's happened for a long time in Colorado and will probably continue to happen into the future. So they do pose a safety risk, but being aware of that safety can really go a long way in mitigating your issues or future conflicts with lions. Go ahead. So this is a good kind of a way for kids, especially, to learn and remember how to encounter or how to react when they encounter a mountain lion. So teach them the acronym SMART. Again, S, stop and don't run, don't back away, or don't just panic and run away from the animal. M, to make yourself look big. So if your kids are out by themselves, playing together, have them group together, put their arms up. If they got a backpack on, put that backpack over their head. A, announce loudly, leave me alone, whatever it is, go away, go Broncos, I don't care. Just yell something at that lion to make sure it knows that you're in charge. R, retreat by backing away slowly. So again, slowly, you don't want to run backwards. Could trip if you're running backwards. It has the possibility to trigger that predatory instinct. And then T, tell an adult. So a lot of times, I guess I don't have kids, but I've had incidences where kids will say, oh yeah, I've seen that mountain lion before, or I've seen a moose over here before, and their parents have absolutely no idea that that's happened. So let them know that it's important to let an adult or responsible person know that they had an experience with the mountain lion. All right, true or false? My pets are safe in my fenced backyard. False, yeah. So again, up here in Nederland, I know we've got a lot of dogs and cats that hang out outside all the time, which is great. There's lots of friendly dogs. I love seeing them, but protecting those dogs in a way that is going to be secure from a mountain lion is really important, whether that's bringing them in outside. I know this time of year, many people aren't having them staying outside anyways, but in the summertime, bringing them in out from outside at night, having a good tall fence. A mountain lion can pretty easily jump over a 6-10 foot fence. So having something that's fully enclosed if they are going to be outside is going to be pretty important. All right, true or false, problem wildlife should be relocated. Anyone take a guess? True, this is kind of another both one. I think it says false on here, but Although relocation can be a tool for us as wildlife officers, there are numerous reasons why relocating wildlife may not be an option. Disease spread, territorial issues, and ultimately relocation just doesn't always work. So I'll give you a quick example. You can go to the next slide, of kind of what we have in our toolbox as wildlife officers. You can hit it like 3 times. So we have these tools basically to help mitigate wildlife conflict in communities. Community outreach is a huge one. That's kind of the step we're at right now. Hazing is kind of the next step up from there. There's kind of 2 different types of hazing that you can do. Any individual, any person can do just kind of any low-key hazing, where that's banging pots and pans, spraying water, yelling, honking a car horn, flashing lights, that sort of stuff is all great hazing to make those lions uncomfortable, or bears uncomfortable, deer uncomfortable, elk, any wildlife. We can ratchet the hazing up through my agency. If I'm coming out to haze an animal, I have the ability to use pepper spray, a taser, less lethal shotgun rounds, which really can help a lot with hazing. If this lion does seem like it's going to be hanging around in this neighborhood over the next couple of days, we'll probably move toward that hazing technique to try and get the lion out of here. Like Dave said, male lions especially have huge home ranges. So what I would expect from this lion would be, it comes in here, it looks for prey for a little bit, maybe 2-3 days, and then it moves on to its next spot. If that's not the case, then we can kind of ratchet things up. After that, we tend to look at relocation as an option. It's not always an option, but if we can make it happen, we'll try and take that step. And ultimately, if there is no other solution that we can find, and there is a public safety risk, then we'll look at euthanasia. I hate that part. It's the worst part of my job. I know there's a lot of people that I've seen on Facebook that say this is a death sentence for the lion. If you're going to report it to me, report it to CPW. That is not the case. Things have to go a long way before we get to that euthanasia. There are certain cases where we have to jump right to it. It's rare. I've never really had to do that in my career, but it has happened before. If it's a direct public safety concern, that's something we'll address, but we don't want to do that. It's not what I'm here for. That's not why I went to college for 6 years to get this job. I don't want to kill animals. So we want to try as much as we can before we kill a lion, kill a bear, kill a moose, anything. Quick example of how this process works. This is a bear, but similar process could happen for a mountain lion. So this was last year, May 21st of last year. You can kind of right here, this tree. Picture up right here. I saw this bear. It was reported to me running near the skate park off Belmont. So I went over and checked it out. It was sleeping in a tree. So I let it be for a little while. When it came out of the tree, I was able to hit it with a couple of less lethal shotgun rounds. And so it sauntered off. It knew that humans were a bad thing, which was great. It's like, cool, bear's done. He's gone. Won't have any more problems. 5 hours later, go back. Does anyone recognize that intersection right there? It's a little tough to see. This is the band shell right at Canyon and Broadway. And that's the bear right there. So me and a couple of City of Boulder Rangers actually kind of closed down a couple of lanes, waited for that bear to come down. Just happened to be a Friday at 5 o'clock in May, which was fantastic. Oh, and Boulder High School was doing their graduation ceremony. So just lovely time to try and haze a bear. So that bear came down out of the tree right at 5 o'clock. We're able to push it down into the creek, and it followed the creek for maybe a quarter mile. It went towards Boulder High School, which was not great. Luckily, it did not go into their graduation ceremony. Super thankful for that. Again, I thought, all right, this bear has had some pretty negative experiences with humans. Like, hopefully we don't see it again. Go to the next slide. June 5th, 2 weeks later, it pops up in somebody's backyard, right in the middle of Boulder. It's in a very high traffic area, just not a good spot for this bear to be. So we darted it, I put tags on it, and then I think if you click on this, then we were able to relocate it. So this should show up in just a second. That bear ran off like a bat out of hell, out of that cage. She was not happy that she was seeing me for the third time, which is great. I thought we were done. But if you go to the next slide here, this is where I picked her up. I darted her right here. I relocated her up to the top corner of the screen. 11 days later, she got hit by a car on Highway 36. 20 miles in 11 days for a very small bear. I use this example because it's just an example of why relocation does not always work. It does work sometimes. I've had good luck with relocation in like 2 or 3 incidences, but a lot of the time it doesn't work. This bear came back in 11 days to less than a mile where she was originally found and got hit by a car. So sad story, but just an example of why relocation isn't always the best option. Go ahead. So this is another example of some more recent data. These data points are all mountain lion observations that have been reported to Colorado Parks and Wildlife since January of 2021, so just over a year. This is the whole state. It's kind of zoomed out. You see a lot along this I-25 corridor here, a lot right around Denver, a lot right around Fort Collins and Loveland. I'll zoom in a little bit, or sorry, hit the next slide. So this is kind of just the northern front range from Denver down here up to Fort Collins. Then go to the next one. And this is, I know it's probably tough to see on the screen. There's little yellow dots here. This is the general Boulder area. We've only got 27 data points in this data set right now. And I'm sure that's probably, well, 27 in this Boulder area, not for the whole state. There's a lot in the whole state. That's probably kind of a surprise to a lot of you that you would expect there to be more. There definitely are more. These are only the ones that get reported to me. I would imagine it's probably about a fifth, maybe, of what is actually seen on the landscape. Usually if there's a lion around, we get 1 or 2 reports on it, but I'm sure there's a lot that go either undetected or unreported. So I use this as kind of just a plea or an ask that if you do have a lion experience, even if it's just I saw a lion, giving us a call to help keep tabs on where these cats are at is really helpful for me as an officer to help decide how we're going to handle management of these species within our area. So, and I'll talk a little bit later about how to report stuff to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So again, wildlife and lions are present on the landscape. They've always been here. They're not going to go away. We don't want them to go away. We want to perpetuate that resource so people 100, 500 years from now can see mountain lions, can see bears, can see moose, elk. I want those animals to be on the landscape forever. But I can't do that without help from you guys. And I appreciate Wild Bear so much for allowing me to have a platform tonight to come out and talk to a lot of people. Dave for, spending the time to come out and talk tonight too. He's volunteering right now, essentially, I think. So, and the audience, thank you guys for being willing to spend 2 hours or an hour, I guess, listening to me ramble on a Zoom call. I really appreciate you guys being here and being willing to learn about wildlife and mountain lions in general. Reporting wildlife issues, if you do have a life-threatening emergency of any kind, call 911. JP, who's a Nederland PD officer, he's here in the audience for you guys who can't see. Call 911 if there's a mountain lion attack in Nederland. He's going to get there before I am, because like Dave said, I cover from Fort Lupton to Rollins Pass, so it's going to take a while for me to get there. JP will be there, Boulder County will be there, county rangers will be there. So call 911 if you have a life-threatening emergency. If you have a wildlife sighting, if you have general questions, if you have a conflict that's not really an emergency, you just want to talk to somebody about it, there's a couple numbers here. I'll read them out because I think they're probably mirrored on there. So I dispatch through Colorado State Patrol. If you need to get a hold of me or a wildlife officer, 24/7, 365, 303-239-4501. And maybe I'll ask Jill to type this up in the chat so you guys can see that. If that number, either you're having trouble with it, you should be able to get through. But if you're having trouble with it, or if it's something where you want to talk to like a wildlife minded person right away, during business hours, you can call our Denver office, which is 303-291-7227. Some examples of things that you might call those two numbers for would be wildlife sightings, pet or livestock attacks, hunting issues or questions. If you have an issue with a hunter, if you are a hunter and you want to talk to an officer or talk to somebody who knows what's going on in the area, or if you just want general advice on how to coexist with wildlife, we'll be able to help you out through there. All right, I think that's all I've got. I'm sure there's a ton of questions, so yeah, anybody?
Yeah, I have a few.
Yeah, of course.
So we do this thing for bears in the summer where when it's time to let our dogs out to pee, we have a slightly fenced yard and we let them out and we make noises or shine a light. Do you think that's effective for lions as well? Or should we be out there and alert with them?
Yeah, so the question is, letting your dogs out to pee like at night during the summer, shining a light in the backyard, you know, yelling out in the backyard, is that effective for lions and bears? The answer I would say is probably yes. The light, especially, if nothing else, you're gonna get a glare of their eyes, so you'll be able to see if there is a lion back there. Most likely, unless you have a lot of good cover for lions, you might not be able to see them or detect them that easily. Yelling, just making sure that lion knows that you're there, that bear knows that you're there, that goes a really long way.
Second question, how long do they stay with their baby?
Oh, that's a good question. If you have something to add to this, go ahead, but I'll give it a shot. So I don't know the exact number offhand, but typically what I have seen is like an 8-month-old kit will start going off on its own. If you're seeing something that has a little bit of like striping on it, like just very faint, that's probably like a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old cat. If you're seeing something like that picture that Dave showed earlier that looks like a bobcat, that's, you know, probably anywhere from a newborn, like 2 months or 1 month to 2 months old, to like 6 months, where they're having that really spotted pattern. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Dave.
Yeah. What that is sometimes it'll have 2, I think 3 calls with the moms, but sometimes on the street. With a couple babies and another mom. So
I think there were some pictures last year of like right in like kind of North Boulder-ish, during the winter of 4 lions all walking together, which is pretty incredible, but not all that rare. I mean, it happens, especially with younger animals. The males will be older males will be a lot more solitary for sure. So okay.
I was first.
Yep. Okay.
How frequently do they kill?
So the question is, how frequently will mountain lions make a kill? Ultimately, it's going to depend on what their body condition is and their prey density. So if there's, you know, a ton of prey around, they maybe are going to have a more consistent kill rate. If they're having to spend a lot of time searching for that prey, it's going to be a little less consistent, a little more spaced out. If they're eating foxes, raccoons primarily, that's going to be like a, you know, once every other night, or once every 3 nights kind of thing. But if they've got a deer, an elk, something of that size, like Dave said, they'll eat a deer and elk for 3 or 4 days. So they could make a kill. I guess I don't have a very good range off the top of my head, but probably in the, like, if they're eating deer, elk, 7 to 12 day range, maybe a little bit longer than that. So seem reasonable,
so
Dave?
I have a question from Heather Lazarus. I found a few deer legs. Oh,
So the question is, are you muted on there or?
I just want to move over here.
Okay, gotcha.
Can you guys hear me when I ask that question? Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll just-
Okay. So the question is, seeing deer legs in trees, do mountain lions cache deer legs in trees? So they won't particularly cache a deer in a tree, but sometimes if it's small enough, they'll take the whole carcass into a tree and they'll just start consuming it. I don't know if you guys have seen pictures of, especially of like jaguars or leopards in Africa. They'll do that a lot with gazelles or whatever antelope they capture, and they'll go up in a tree and they'll just eat it in the tree. If you have a big enough lion and a small enough deer, they can pull something up the tree and they'll just consume it up there. So super rare. It's a really cool thing to see, but definitely possible that it could be a lion.
Okay, another question from Kirk. What are your thoughts about walking, hiking on local roads, trails at night with regards to mountain lion safety?
So my recommendation on walking on trails and roads at night, it's ultimately going to be a risk assessment that you're going to have to make for yourself. So that's definitely going to be riskier than walking during the day. Mountain lions are going to be more active at night. That's when they're primarily going to be hunting. I usually don't go on night hikes by myself. If you are going to go on a night hike, a night walk, having a partner with you, having a light, having a headlamp, a bear bell. Some people tie a little bell to their shoe. When I go by myself, even if I'm on patrol and I'm hiking through the woods at night, I just sing to myself. People probably think I'm a lunatic, but I sing to myself like kind of loudly, just so if there's anything in the area, it knows that I'm a human, it knows that I'm there. They're not going to be surprised. A lot of the attacks and incidents that we see where people get injured, they're surprising a bear, they're surprising a moose, they're surprising a mountain lion. If you can make that animal aware that you're in the area, there's probably less likelihood that you're going to have a conflict. But again, that nighttime factor, it's ultimately going to be your hike. How much risk are you willing to take in order to enjoy that night hike? It's going to be riskier, but it's just the balance. It's tough to say. I'd mitigate it, like I said, singing, talking, going with a group, having a light. Those would be probably the main couple things.
Good.
All right, another question. This is from Karen. What precautions should we take when hiking with dogs?
So precautions, hiking with dogs. Leashes are always great. I know there's a lot of great spots around here to go without a leash, which is great. I take my dog off leash sometimes. I wouldn't go off leash at night if you're not somewhere that you're familiar with or very comfortable with. I would keep your dog on a leash at night around dawn and dusk. If you are having them off leash during the day, keep them generally close to you. Letting them just run off into the woods can cause certain problems or increase the likelihood that you're going to run into something. Also kind of increases the likelihood that your dog might harass other wildlife. So that's a different topic, but we don't like dogs chasing moose, chasing elk, chasing deer. JP's got a comment here. So this is JP with Nederland Police Department. So.
Hi guys, some of you guys know me. I'll just give you guys a quick example. For instance, my dogs, great off leash, great recall. If they're in town, especially if we know an animal has been around, we make sure to have them on leash. I understand I'm from Nederland. There's a lot of town dogs, you walk around with them. If we know there's wildlife in the area, whether that's a 1,000-pound moose, whether that's mountain lions, whether that's bears and that, make sure to have your dogs on leash. It is town municipal code. It's Austin code throughout the county. Biggest thing though is we had an instance last year, actually about 10 months ago. We had to call up Sam to find out what the charge was because we had a lady who said her dogs are usually great off leash that would not leave a moose alone. And I can tell you as a police officer, if I nearly get trampled by a 1,000-pound animal, you're getting a ticket. So not to be mean, but the biggest thing is we want to keep your animals safe. We want to keep you safe. We want to go home safe to our family. So if you're around town, especially if we know there's an animal, please have your animals on leash.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks, JP.
Another one. So our fence, this is from Trinity, our fence is useful at all? Let's see. I know they aren't 100% barrier, but how effective are they as a deterrent? We have a 6-foot wire perimeter fence.
So fences can be useful to some extent. When it comes to bears, they're probably more useful than they are for mountain lions. Bears can certainly climb whatever they want. Bears will climb trees like that. But it's going to take them a little bit longer. A mountain lion will get over a 6-foot fence in just one leap. So useful, yes. Totally effective, I would say definitely not. And then to add on to that, having an enclosure over the fence too. You want something that's going to be sturdy. You don't just want like chicken fence that's kind of, woven into the top of your chain link or something like that. Something that's got some structure to it on the top is going to be the best way to keep stuff out.
Okay, thank you. This is from Chayton. Is it true that lions are much less likely to attack your dogs if you are with them, even at night?
So I would say yes, it's more likely that you will not have a dog attack if you are with your dog. So ultimately what that lion sees when it sees a dog is a prey animal. How much does your dog look like a coyote? How much does your dog look like a fox or even a bobcat? Even if they, they're black or they're spotted, they're Dalmatian or something like that. They probably still are given that same search image is what the technical term is for that lion. They see something 4-legged and furry. They're probably going to see it as a prey animal. They typically don't see humans as prey animals. So if you are with your dog, especially if you're close to your dog, you're probably going to have a lower likelihood of having a conflict if you're there with it.
Okay.
If your dog is barking at the mountain lion, does that entice the lion?
I would say barking is probably a good defense mechanism. Again, kind of similar thing would kind of apply with humans and dogs. If that dog tucks tail and turns around and runs, that lion might understand maybe this thing's not going to put up a fight. But if that dog's standing its ground, especially if there's a human around, they might see it as a more difficult thing to attack, something that's more difficult to take down. Like Dave said earlier, typically lions are ambush predators, so they'll jump out of a tree, they'll jump from a bush. They are not coursing type predators where they want to go chasing after something. They'll take 3 or 4 bounds and catch something, but if they're having to run a long distance, they're not really going to want to do that. But if your dog is postured up and in an aggressive or defensive stance, it would probably deter the lion a little bit. I'm not going to say that's 100% going to work, but barking and having that more aggressive stance is probably going to go in the dog's favor.
One more question. So this is from Trisha. Our dog stays inside except to go out in the morning and evening to do his business. He also goes out for hikes with us. We have a 6-foot fence. Would you recommend we watch him when he goes out in our fenced yard, usually for about 5 minutes?
I think it's probably a good idea to watch them if they're going out, even in a fenced yard, if it's like dawn and dusk or at night. I live in Erie and we don't have as many mountain lion issues down there, but we have a ton of coyotes. Like every other week, there's another coyote issue with a pet of some sort. My dog is tiny. You'd think a game warden would have a big giant dog, but no, I've got a little tiny dog. So we let him out and we shine a light in the backyard. We yell in the backyard before we let him out. So probably not necessary to totally supervise them when you're letting them out, unless it's at night. If it's like, dawn or dusk, you could probably get away with letting them go out for 5 minutes, but go out before them, yell, shine a light in the backyard like you guys, sounds like you do. Definitely doesn't hurt to supervise them, especially if you know something's around.
I have one more.
Yeah, there's definitely coyotes around. I know a few of you guys actually contacted me and some of my colleagues about the one on Barker yesterday. I think there was one that was out on the reservoir. yipping its head off. I think it's okay. Last I heard, it had ran off, so I'm hopeful that he's okay. But yeah, there's definitely coyotes around town too.
Okay. One last question. What are the laws? It's a good question. It was on Facebook, lots of talking. What are the laws regarding self-defense if a mountain lion is approaching you?
So self-defense and mountain lions or wildlife in general. If you're in imminent danger, and you need to defend yourself, you need to defend your family, you need to defend someone else, you can use lethal self-defense. What I guess I'm trying to say is you can shoot a mountain lion, you can shoot an elk, you can shoot a moose or a bear if you are being attacked. So self-defense, we're going to have questions. We're going to investigate it. We had an incident with a bear 2 years ago, I think, around not too far from Nederland, where a gentleman shot a bear in self-defense. Totally legit. If you actually need to do that, just understand that we'll have questions and we'll investigate it. If it's legit, then there's nothing to worry about. So if you feel that threat of your life, is hanging in the balance, then definitely take action if you need to. If that does happen, just report it to us. The law says you have to do so within 5 days. I'd recommend sooner. Just yes. Prevention is everything. If you also, another thing, if you report it to us sooner, we can salvage that carcass probably. If you have to kill something, we can probably donate something out of it, which is ultimately what we like to do if we have to kill something. So.
Can I just add on to that? I think the Facebook argument is over if it attacks your pet. What precautions can we take?
Yeah, so audience member just added that the argument on Facebook that they saw was that if it attacks your pet, what actions can you take? And this is where it does get a little weird. I think I did actually see somebody posted our nuisance wildlife laws worksheet. So if anybody wants a reference, just Google Colorado Parks and Wildlife nuisance wildlife laws, and it's a great PDF that shows you specifically about mountain lions and bears, like towards the end, but lots of stuff about rabbits, raccoons, foxes, all sorts of other stuff on there. If an animal is attacking your pet, you legally cannot shoot that animal. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that's what the law is. I don't have any control over what it is. Those laws are determined both by the legislature and by the Colorado Wildlife Commission. So legally, you cannot shoot an animal if it's attacking your pet. On the flip side, if that animal has commercial value, say it's a steer, it's livestock, it's a goat, it's a livestock animal, you can protect your property if it's livestock with lethal control. And it sounds weird, it's counterintuitive, but that's just how the law is.